philosopher and writer from the sort of 1930s through to the 1940s, and I think the early 1950s as well. She's an extremely controversial figure in American literature and philosophy. Her two most famous novels were The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged. Atlas Shrugged is listed as one of the longest novels ever written. It's up there with War and Peace and a few other big ones. I think it's like number 11 in the longest novels ever written. But yeah, it's huge. And The Fountainhead's also pretty big, but it's definitely not as long. Her philosophy she called Objectivism, and it's got a real huge stigma, mainly in America, not so much in England, but it's generally derided and generally not liked. Both of these novels are considered the sort of things that is sort of a cliche thing for young thinking students to have in their back pocket. That's like a famous cliche in America. But it's also become a bit more than that. It's generally considered a joke and a bit of a negative philosophy because of some of the more controversial elements of the philosophy. Personally, I liked it. I like the novels and I like the philosophy. I don't entirely agree with every point of objectivism, but I definitely think that she had a few things to say that I agreed with, that I read and I thought, yeah, well, that's a good thing. I don't know. So she sort of began, she wrote a couple of different things, but The Fountainhead was kind of like her first big statement about her philosophy. It's about a guy called Howard Roark, and he's a architecture graduate who moves to New York to become a famous architect. But he refuses to compromise, and that's the whole point of the novel, and kind of the point of objectivism, or one of the points of objectivism. He absolutely will not compromise for anybody on his vision, and that sort of creates the drama of the novel as he kind of butts up against people who say, in order to become more successful, you should make small compromises now, because it's just better for yourself, it just makes more sense. But every single stage of his life, everything he comes up against, he refuses to compromise. And so lots of people find this like annoying and they butt up against him because they dislike it. Other people go out of the way to try and destroy him because they're either scared of a person like that, or again they just don't like it. And then one or two people see what he really is doing and admire him for it and champion him, and sort of they give him help, and ultimately he has some success, or maybe doesn't. I don't want to spoil it too much, but because I do really think this one everybody should read. It is a fantastic novel. It is, that's the other thing. Obviously it's a philosophical novel, so the whole point is she's trying to get her philosophy across. But it is a great story. It is really, really gripping. And it's really shocking to read this guy, because he's so antagonistic and he's so difficult, because he constantly just refuses to, like I said, compromise. And several times you'll think yourself, when I was reading I thought, no, I'd compromise a little bit, because I'd think, in 5 years' time my life will be exactly where I want it to be, so surely it's worth it. But it's just crazy to follow a man who just will not do it. And I did admire him. Like, I felt like when I was reading it that it was unrealistic, and it sort of puts you to shame as well. I just thought, God, I wish I could be like that, but I know that I can't. But I still didn't dislike it, because, like I said, I wished I could be like that. I think it's admirable, some of his sort of principles. So The Fountainhead, like I said, it was a real kind of shocking, sort of punky, like, this is my philosophy, take it or leave it. And like I said, if you read it and you like it, then go on. But if you read it and you hate it, then don't bother reading this one, obviously. So Atlas Shrugged was her saying, okay, you've got the idea, this is my philosophy, now I'm going to flesh it out and show you all the facets of it, every single piece of what my opinion is and how I think it would work. So it's huge, and it's all about objectivism. It's centered on objectivism. So, one friend of mine really hated it because he said that she constantly rammed it down your throat. And I'd probably read about that much and hadn't noticed. And then after he said that, when I tried to carry on, I suddenly started to notice how often she had her characters explain the philosophy. which started to bug me a little bit. So it's an element of the novel which you definitely got to think about when you're reading it. But the funny thing about this one is that the characters are less aggressive about the philosophy. It's sort of more like you don't have to absolutely be Howard Roark and live your life from birth to be a true follower of the philosophy. You can make mistakes, you can have faltering, and you can slip and etc., but you can still work your way up to this philosophy. She also, unfortunately in this one, which is the more controversial one, she starts to put forward some of the other elements of objectivism that people really hate. So things like it being quite elitist. So the idea is that the artist is sort of precious, and an artist has the right to have all the success of their art. That's the good side. But then she also sort of accounts for the fact that, you know, if everybody got their dream, then we wouldn't have anybody who cleans toilets or washes dishes, etc. So she believes that some people should be put into those kind of roles of life, which, you know, obviously people would say, well, that's not fair, that's not equality. So there's sort of elements like that people hate, and I mean, like I said, I like some bits and then I like other bits. You know, that's fine. You can think that about philosophy. You don't have to follow every single part of it. The story is about a woman who is the unofficial head of a railway company that's her family-run business. Her brother is the official head, but he's an incompetent moron. But she's the unofficial head because she actually has the ability and the mental power to run this massive national railway company called Taggart Transcontinental. So immediately that's the conflict. We've got one person who society says can't be an industry leader because she's a woman, who actually has the ability to do it, and then this other person, her brother, who's a complete moron, who, because he's a man, he does have the ability to lead the company. So he's the face of the company, and everybody believes that the success of the company is down to him. Actually, it's down to his sister. So the sister meets all these other people who are in similar positions, and together they start to form this thing where they basically pull themselves out of society, and they stop giving and giving and giving for other people to make money off of the back of them. And because all of these important people who are kind of working behind the scenes stop giving, the world starts to crumble and society starts to break down. And that's kind of the point she was trying to make. It's sort of set in a weird alternate future, but because it was written in the 30s and the future is essentially like the 1950s, reading it now, it's kind of like reading a sort of alternative past, which is essentially the Bioshock video games. That is the world of it. So it's sort of like it's kind of a bit like diesel punk or steampunk. It's like an alternate past, but a future for them. So it's not overtly science fiction. It's only set 20 years in advance of when it was written. So there's only a few tiny little things that give it a sort of science fiction-y edge. But it's more the fact that the whole society crumbles. That's, you know, that makes it science fiction, because that didn't actually happen. The only thing that I would warn people, even if they do love Ayn Rand and are really excited about reading the book, is there's a chapter towards the end which is a radio broadcast by one of the main characters, and I would say it's probably about 100 pages long. There's no break in it. It's all just one straight long piece of dialogue. The book's quite famous for it, but I didn't know that before I read it. And when I started the chapter, it was like, you know, the afternoon. I had like maybe a couple of hours, and I was like, oh, I'll give this a try, like this next chapter. And I was just like, what the hell? Why is it not ending? And it just went on and on and on and on. So I'm just going to warn you now, if you're going to read it, when you get to that point, be prepared. Give yourself the whole day just for reading that one chapter, because it's insane. But it's very rewarding. I really loved the book. I did find it incredibly rewarding. I really, really enjoyed it. There's some really incredible moments of like tragedy and drama and stuff like that in it. And I mean, that's true of both of them. They're great, enjoyable books to read, you know, because they're tragic and they tell a story and they have drama. So whether you agree with the philosophy or not, you know, take it or leave it really. But if you agree with the philosophy or you like it, it just makes it a million times better. So that's my recommendation. Ayn Rand.